when I was in school, I was looking out the window, figuring out how I could be hunting or fishing.
Flip Pallot, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My great pleasure to be here.
Welcome to the Rivers and Tides podcast, where we have guests on to hear stories of healing and resiliency through outdoor pursuits. Flip Pallot, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You know, you are truly an icon and a pioneer, not just in the fishing world and the hunting world, but as an outdoorsman in general. You know, someone who has spent a majority of their life in the outdoors and has made a living of spending time in the outdoors and is an advocate for spending time in the outdoors. To have you on, to be able to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and to hear your voice speak to the message that we're trying to get across with this podcast to veterans, and not just veterans, but anybody who may be struggling with mental health challenges, who may be struggling to overcome drug addiction, challenges with PTSD, any challenges somebody might be having in their life, that the role that nature can play in helping heal somebody and how powerful it can be in helping someone heal and get to a better place from a mental health standpoint, and how positive an impact it can have on someone's mental health. To have you on to be able to speak to that is awesome, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
My great pleasure to be here. And that's all nature does. That's nature's full-time job, is to heal and provide. So it's no great surprise that nature does that. And it's no great surprise to me that someone like yourself picked up on it and decided to feature it in some way. I think it's a unique place to be in this world today.
It is, and I think that, there's so many people out there who don't even realize that at a primal level, their bodies and souls are crying to spend time in nature. It gives you something that none of these technology devices can give you. And, people are miserable these days, and everyone's depressed, and I think there's a direct correlation you can see between technological advances and spending more time inside and behind screens and people's mental health state. They just, at a primal level, we don't belong doing all that stuff. We belong in nature.
It's true. And if you think it's bad now, wait till November. There'll be people on both sides who will really be miserable after November, no matter what happens. So it on the near horizon doesn't look like things are going to get any better, and so the role of nature becomes even ever more important.
I agree. Let's start out. I know you were born and raised. I've listened to some podcasts that you've done, and you were born and raised here in Miami. Where were your parents from?
They were from there as well. They were from South Florida, both of them. And but it was different then. I mean, when I was born there, which was in the early 40s, I'm 82 years old. So when I grew up in South Florida, in the greater Miami area, it was country. And the people who lived there were Florida people. Traditional Florida people. And so there were traditional Florida values that existed all around us. And nature played a big role then. There was dairy farming there. There was cattle farming there. There was citrus farming there. It was rural. I think the population of greater Miami, which included several cities that surrounded Miami proper, Miami Beach and Coral Gables and Homestead and Florida City and North Miami, South Miami. I think there was a total of something like 85,000 people there.
Wow.
So when you would go to the movies and stand in line, you knew everybody in line. I mean, it was truly a community. It wasn't a vibrant city like it is now. So it was quite different, and it was right on the edge of the Everglades. It sprawled out toward the Florida Keys, and Biscayne Bay created the whole eastern edge of the whole county. So it was not only rural, but there was tremendous access to the natural world, both for fishing and hunting. And so it was the ideal place for a kid to grow up.
Sounds like a pretty amazing time.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Was there a time, was there a certain point in time where you saw a huge influx of people to Florida? Was it a certain point, or has it just kind of been happening since then? It just slowly got to where we are today.
It was, excuse me, it was insidious. It happened slowly. You really didn't pay much attention to it. You felt it more than saw it. Then there was a time in the early 60s in South Florida where there was a tremendous influx of Cuban refugees when they had the change of government in Cuba, and a lot of Cubans came. And so the feeling of the place developed sort of a Latin quality. I'm not sure how to describe the feeling that changed when that many Latins were injected into a small community. It was a good thing. I mean, it helped the community a lot, but it added a lot of population. But it gave, I guess, a cosmopolitan feel, because it was country. I mean, it was a, Florida place, and all of a sudden it was
Florida natives.
Yeah, and all of a sudden there were all these Latins there, and the pace got faster, and the language got faster, and everything got got faster, and a lot more interesting. Yeah, it was a cool time to be there and see that change. But it wasn't really a good change in terms of population. I think that was the beginning of the real true growth of South Florida. And it would not have mattered who came, whether they were from Havana or Wisconsin. The inflation of population, the elbow room wasn't there any longer. Traffic picked up. More restaurants, more banks, more people, more hustle, more bustle. And it seemed like the more it happened, the faster it happened. Until all of a sudden it was out of control. And there weren't cities anymore. There used to be Miami, that was a city. Fort Lauderdale was a separate city. Palm Beach, a separate city. And then all of a sudden, as so many people came, it became a megalopolis. I mean, it was just one bunch of people and horrible traffic. And the worst part of it was the traditional Florida values became diluted. And people weren't nearly as concerned about alligators as they were tea time on the local golf course. It was a totally different. And as I said, it happened in this insidious way. You didn't even realize it was going on. And then in 93, we had a horrible hurricane. And after that hurricane, we woke up the next morning and realized that It wasn't our home anymore. So we moved here.
Well, you have definitely carved out your own little sanctuary, for lack of a better way I can explain it. It's absolutely a paradise here. Your home is beautiful. Your surroundings are beautiful. I mean, it feels like we're in a different world just being in your yard.
Well, it was just like what you said earlier. I mean, we did this so that we could be near these things and touch these things and be influenced by these things. And when we built our home, we tried not to tear down a single thing that we didn't really absolutely have to move to build the structures. Well, even in our move from our ancestral home, it was an effort to stay in nature.
What was it like? What was a young Flip Pallot like back in the day and in high school in Miami? What was your crew like? What did you do for fun? What kind of mischief did you get involved in? What was Flip Pallot like back then?
I was very quiet, but I was in the woods all the time or fishing. I mean, and when I was in school, I was looking out the window, figuring out how I could be hunting or fishing.
So as far back as you can remember,
you
had a passion for...
Yeah. I just, I wasn't made for anything else. I tried other things. But no, I was made to be right here.
You know, we were talking, Austin and I, and we're talking last night. You know, it's envious that you have been able to make a living doing what you love. It's rare that I think people get to do that. You know, it's this dichotomy of, you know, you feel the pressure. I've got to make money. I've got to have medical benefits for my family. I've got to have a retirement put aside. And, you know, at some point to take that leap and just say, I'm going to go for it. I want to follow my heart. It's envious that you've been able to do that. And I think, it's rare that people get to do that. So it's a great thing.
I wish I could say that I was courageous and just did it and followed my heart. I wanted to, but you know, there are tremendous pressures. You know, my parents didn't go to school, so they wanted me to go to school. So there was that. And I wanted to please them, and so I did. And, you know, then society wants you to get a job and have an income and have a paid vacation and a 401 and retirement benefits and medical benefits and vacation. And I tried that. God, I was miserable in that role, really miserable. And I think I had to reach that stage of misery before I had the courage to jump out and say goodbye to all those benefits. And it's very scary. I think it's much scarier today than it was then, but all of a sudden when the net is gone, it's frightening because you don't know where your income stream will be, or how consistent it will be, or what it'll provide in the future. And there are no benefits, none.
Yeah.
So you have to be miserable or very, very daring. In my case, I wasn't so daring. I was just very miserable. And I was lucky because I was a fisherman and I was a hunter, and I spent so much time doing it in my youngerhood that I came to know the water in Florida and the woods in Florida. And so when I began to guide, I knew people in the world of angling and fly fishing who were able to recommend customers for me right away. I didn't have to hang out a shingle and wait for the phone to ring. All that happened immediately for me. I was just lucky. I mean, there were people paying me, not that much money at the time, but paying me to take them fishing, paying me to take them hunting, paying me to share my world, which was the natural world, and again, to things that you said earlier, my customers immediately were very, very successful surgeons and legal minds and scientists from all walks of life who were surrounded by everything but the natural world. And so they looked forward to the little bit of time that they would spend with me every year, because they came back year after year. They kept their same dates, and they brought their families, and they brought their kids, and their kids brought their kids, and it became, I think, their touchstone to the natural world. And it became medicinal for them to be here for that short time every year, because it allowed them to step away from all the noise and all the pressure and all that society expected of them, just for a short time. And it was enough of a break to get them through to the next year when they came back and did it again. And they wouldn't do anything else for the rest of the year except work.
It's, I'm sure that every time they left, they immediately looked forward to the next time they were going to come out here and spend time with you out in nature.
They would immediately start writing letters and discussing next year's dates and what we would do and where we would go. And I was not on a trailer. I mean, I was not tied to a dock anywhere. I was on a trailer. And so we wouldn't do the same thing necessarily every year. We might fish one year in the Keys or in the Everglades or in Biscayne Bay or at Lake Okeechobee or somewhere else. So they looked forward to these adventures every year.
I'm going to back up just a little. So right after you got out of high school, did you go directly to college right after high school?
I did. I went to Auburn University in Alabama, and I stayed there for about a year and a half, and it was a time when the Peace Corps was really popular. And so I decided to join the Peace Corps. So I went for Peace Corps training to the University of Washington in Seattle for a forestry program. And we were supposed to go to the Dominican Republic. And just about the time that we finished our Peace Corps training, there was a coup in the Dominican Republic, and a communist took over and kicked everybody out, including the Peace Corps, out of the Dominican Republic for a time. But I didn't go back to Auburn. I finished up at the University of Miami and in the evening division and worked during the daytime.
Night school.
So, yeah, night school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of my buddies were in night school with me. The kids that I grew up hunting and fishing with, Norman Duncan and Chico Fernandez, and we all went to night school at the University of Miami together, John Emery, and it was a great time.
You guys fish during the day and get out during the day?
God, we fished. We were nuts. I mean, we really were.
I've heard the stories of the blow-up mattresses, and I mean, it's you guys, you ever look back on that and go, how did nothing bad happen?
It was an amazing time, and it was interesting in that parentally, those times couldn't happen now. I mean, parents would never let their children do what our parents let us do.
That's true.
They would be jailed.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
God, my mother used to drop me off in the morning in the dark on the edge of the Everglades when I was 14, 15 years old, and just drive away and leave me there for the day.
How old were you guys when you were, paddling out on blow-up mattresses to go fishing?
Well, it was high school, and early college years. So we were probably 18, something like that. 18,
bulletproof
19,
bulletproof at that age.
Oh my God! But I mean, you know what an air mattress is? They were little plastic. The things that we did on those air mattresses and the distances that we covered, just paddling them with our hands.
Wow.
It's a wonder that we didn't get sharked or worse.
Well, you made it through, and it certainly makes for a great story now.
It's quite amazing.
Something I don't know that a lot of people know about you, I don't hear it much brought up in your interviews, is that you're a veteran yourself.
I am, yeah. Yeah. I was in the Army, United States Army, for 4 years. And during that time, I was stationed, for the most part, in Panama. And when I got there, we were at war with Panama. I probably would have gone to Vietnam, but they needed Spanish-speaking people to go to Panama, and at that point I did speak Spanish, and the Panamanians had taken over the canal zone.
Wow.
And we actually were in a shooting war with Panama, which only lasted a couple of weeks, I think. But I was sent there then and stayed for 4 years.
How did you enlist, or did you get drafted? How did that?
I got drafted and then enlisted to go to the Army Language School.
Okay.
And that enlistment trade-off was a 4-year enlistment. So I was there for, which was, I have to say that I enjoyed being in the Army. I did. I enjoyed every aspect of it. I enjoyed the physical part of it. I enjoyed the food. It was just a great experience for me. I loved Panama. My God, I mean, the fishing when I was there was unbelievable. And the job that I had in service was such that I worked a certain number of days, and then I worked a certain number of evenings, and then I worked a certain number of midnights. So I had a lot of daytime off. And we only worked 4 days in a row, so I had a ton of time off. I was way into motorcycles in those days, and Latin America was huge into motorcycles then. And I traveled all around Central and South America by motorcycle, and we would put our motorcycles on military air transports.
Really?
Take them, fly our motorcycles all over the Central and South America, and we raced.
Wow.
We raced real hard. It was a great time for me, the military. I was anxious to get out at the end and do other things. I wasn't sure what, but I enjoyed the military. It was a great time, great learning experience, and a great opportunity to see other parts of the world and other people.
What was fishing like over there? What sort of species did you fish for? And did you learn about it from the locals while you were there?
No, the locals didn't know anything about angling. But it's an isthmus. I mean, there was water everywhere, and through the middle of the isthmus was the Panama Canal, which was a series of lakes connected by the canal itself, and those lakes were full of fish. The Pacific Ocean was full of fish, and the Caribbean was on the other side, and it was full of fish. So,
well, at least your time in the military didn't put a dent in your fishing. So
not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, I fished so much and so successfully that a lot of what I wound up doing was taking people fishing, taking officers and dignitaries and other people fishing. So it
worked out pretty good.
Yeah,
sounds like your enlistment was not a bad memory.
Not a bad memory at all. I've been awful lucky.
So when you got out, did you come right back to Florida?
I did. I came back. I came back for a short time and just took some time off just to acclimatize and figure out what I was going to do. I wound up taking a job with an engineering company in Detroit, Michigan. One of the mistakes that I made in life. And I stayed up in Michigan for a couple of years working for that company up there, but the hunting and fishing was really great there at the time too, so it wasn't all bad. But it was working for someone else. And I was beginning to get this feeling that working for other people was not where I was supposed to be. So it didn't last. And Detroit was not a fun city to live in, so wound up coming back here.
And when you came back here, did you start guiding again, or?
No, when I came back here, I went to work in a bank. And it wasn't until after I had worked in the bank for a while that I realized that I just couldn't work for other people. So I left the bank and I tried the retail business for a couple of years. I opened an outdoor shop. It was hunting and fishing, outdoor art, very, very fine guns and tackle, antique furniture, and it was kind of a unique shop.
Quite the mix.
For the time, yeah. And after a couple of years of that, it was fun in many ways, wonderful people, but the shop was in a major regional mall, and the hours were mall hours. I mean, from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. The busiest times of the year were around the holidays and just after the holidays, starting before Thanksgiving and running all the way until after the first of the year. So it was the entire hunting season.
And there's a lot of time you have to put into, buying the products and looking at what's coming out and choosing what to buy. And
it's a lot of travel because I did all that myself. All the buying I did myself. So there was a lot of travel during the rest of the year. So it was an intriguing idea But in fact, it wasn't so much fun. And I think I always knew that life was supposed to be fun at some level, but somehow I wasn't there. So it was at that point that I decided to guide.
Did you sell the business
I
to
did.
somebody else?
I did. And I just walked away. I studied for my captain's license. There was a very, very prominent guide in South Florida who lent me his textbooks and all his papers and everything from his captain's licensing time. And I studied all his stuff. A couple of my friends were interested in getting captain's licenses at the time, and so the three of us went to the Coast Guard, got our licenses, and I started what turned out to be I think I guided for 12 or 14 years in South Florida, the Keys, the Everglades, Central Florida, and then in the summers I guided in Montana for trout.
Beautiful place. It's we were talking earlier, it's become a bit overrun.
Yeah, Montana is changed a lot since I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't call it Bozeman, Bos Angeles for nothing these days.
I know. It's really, really changing. It's kind of sad.
Do you have? I mean, was there when you were guiding, was there a species of fish that they wanted to target, or was it pretty much they left it open to you?
It was. I think the draw has always been the South Florida draw has always been tarpon and bonefish. My customers came to appreciate the Everglades and those species, snook and redfish, trout, ladyfish, sharks, barracuda. They came to appreciate those things because I exposed them to that.
Right.
But the draw initially was tarpon and bonefish. And the populations of tarpon and bonefish then were just enormous. The bone fishing was probably the best bone fishing in the world, anywhere in the world. I mean, there were many fish, and there were huge fish.
Yeah.
So you could catch many bonefish in a day, and you had the chance to catch double-digit bonefish on any day.
What do you have a favorite fish that anything, just being out there, throwing a rod?
Right now, right this minute, my favorite fish is smallmouth bass. I just came back from Wisconsin, fishing up there for smallmouth for the first time seriously. That's an amazing animal.
I've never fished.
Lives in a beautiful place. It was one of the best fishing trips I've ever had. So right now I'm thinking about smallmouth bass, but that'll change.
What year was it when you started Walker's Cay?
90, 92, 93.
Really a pioneer as far as that show is concerned. There was nothing like it at the time.
The only thing that there was or had been was the ABC, American Sportsman show that did some saltwater, and then there was another show that did a little saltwater called Outdoor Life. Those were the only things that had been done at that time. As I started doing walkers, Mark Sosin was starting his show at the same time, maybe a little earlier. But other than that, there was nothing. So it was, again, a matter of great good fortune, luck, that the timing of that endeavor turned out to be what it was. I mean, there were basically 2 saltwater shows, mine and Mark's. So there was almost no competition for the sponsors. I mean, it was just the 2 of us.
So it was pretty easy to get support from companies.
It was. And coincidentally, outdoor television was just emerging. So there was tremendous awareness in the community of sponsors. So if you went to, for example, a truck sponsor, in the waiting room there weren't 6 other guys with TV shows competing with you for that sponsorship.
You were it.
You were it. And so it was, you still had to persuade them that it was a good investment for them to do it. And it was at a time in outdoor television where it wasn't quite so easy to track viewership. That technology didn't exist then. So you weren't able to say to a sponsor, if you do this, you'll have 1.2 million households on a Saturday morning. We didn't have that technology. So it was more make a pilot where they could see their product showcased and make a pilot that was exciting enough and engaging enough and had high enough production values to seduce them into making the commitment. Today, it's a totally different deal. Today, you know exactly how many viewers you have.
Especially like
at any
YouTube
particular moment on a Saturday morning. You also, I mean, the whole making of a pilot and the whole seduction is gone because the attention span of the sponsor or potential sponsor is 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I think the attention span of most of the populace these days is about 2 minutes.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So the whole playing field has tilted in a different direction today than what it was back then. Back then we were shooting film.
I know I was listening to, some of the heroics, it sounds like, of how you shot these things. You would, to get overhead shots, that you would do with a drone today, you had towers built on these boats. And then I heard one of the things you were talking about was to get some of the underwater shots. Sounds like it was a
different world.
Quite the experience for whoever was shooting that underwater scene.
But the doing of it gave rise to all these new ways of doing it.
Yep.
Which is the natural progression of things. And today, the equipment, you can travel to New Zealand and all of your equipment could be in this Yeti cooler.
Yes.
So everything you need can be in this Yeti cooler.
And production quality.
Yes. We had 17 giant boxes, heavy boxes, and they had to be heavy and sturdy so that they wouldn't be abused, because they would be abused in shipping. These were delicate film cameras.
Before the time of Pelican cases.
Oh, yes. and film stock. I mean, we traveled with raw film stock that could not be exposed. And every time you went through customs somewhere, they wanted to see what was in the film canisters.
Jeez.
So you had that whole thing. You had to get permissions and
the logistics must have been astounding.
It was the biggest part of doing it, was getting there and getting all the stuff there. Imagine what it would cost today to get 17 huge boxes on an airplane.
Probably have to charter your own plane.
Every time you went to shoot, that stuff had to go with you. The tripods were made out of metal. I mean, today you pick up a tripod and it's made out of carbon fiber and it's like...
Weighs nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
A camera is this big. It's
I mean, the camera Austin's shooting with right now, I mean, that thing is movie quality. It's
a totally different game. I mean, those guys would put a camera on their shoulder and keep it there all day long, and the camera weighed 40-something pounds.
Yeah, it was a lot harder to shoot back.
It's like having a German Shepherd on your shoulder. It was nuts, and nothing was waterproof.
So everything I think I heard you like for the underwater shots, the camera was encased in a waterproof case that was handmade, right?
The guys made them themselves out of plexiglass and glued them together with whatever the appropriate glue was. And they were big and they were heavy and they were cumbersome. And I remember that one of our cameramen on a trip to Costa Rica where we were trying to film marlin underwater, black marlin and blue marlin. And he had built this housing, and for some reason, whether it was the sound of the camera or the reflection off the plexiglass, whatever it was, it made the marlin hostile. I mean, to the point where they would attack all the time, and he was constantly fending off marlin attacks with his housing.
Quite the heroics.
Yeah, it was just a different, wonderful time. And we had, I guess the most wonderful part of it was that we had complete creative control, only because there was so little competition for sponsorship.
Yeah.
So the shows did not have to be infomercials. You did not have to. I mean, today when you negotiate a deal with a sponsor, he tells you how much airtime his product has to get
in order to get that sponsorship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the very nature of what the game has become, the sponsors are basically in control creatively of the nature of the show. Very, very hard for people producing shows today to avoid that.
Do you see, I guess, talking about kind of the shows of today, the successful ones, some of the more well-known ones like Silver Kings or Sea Hunter or some, and just social media in general, I guess it's sort of a double-edged sword. It brings attention to, and I would guess increases the demand for people to come down and fish for tarpon. And, it seems like there's increasing pressure, increasing number of guides on a decreasing amount of fishable areas and resources.
It's the same in every aspect of life today. You mentioned a couple of the successful shows that are really good shows. And they feature a lot of the wonderful aspects of fishing in the Keys and in saltwater in general. And they draw a tremendous amount of attention to it. And they attract an awful lot of people to it as an activity. But and at one point I resented that, and at another point I was resented for having done that. But what I've learned over years is that if people are not aware of these things, they'll never be protected.
True. Yeah.
And so you can protect them from the people that might engage in these activities by not featuring it, or you can protect it from the even more dangerous development of these resources by making people aware of it. So I think the key to all of this is awareness. What sticks in my mind is that 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, Captains for Clean Water spent a huge amount of money on a survey to find out how many people were aware of water problems in the state of Florida. I disremember the amount of money that they spent on it, but it was significant and it was necessary. The result was astounding. There were only 15% of Floridians who were aware even slightly that there were any sort of water problems in the state of Florida.
That's shocking to me. I would have thought the populace like in other states, but not Florida.
You would have thought that. So here's what that means. The solution to water problems, as much as we dislike acknowledging it, is political.
Yes.
It's the only solution that there is. There's no politician in his right mind who's going to get behind an issue where there's only 15% awareness of the problem.
Especially if they're putting donation dollars at risk by doing
Absolutely.
so.
That's the whole bottom line.
Right. The only way to combat the money is through
awareness.
People.
So clearly what that showed, and so it was a very important investment that they made, it revealed that the real problem is awareness. And the real challenge is how do we make people aware of these problems? So my knee-jerk reaction is these fishing shows that so busily depict this wonderful fishing and hunting that we have here in Florida particularly, but everywhere, in point of fact, if they would spend and dedicate a portion of their actual show to these problems in order to create awareness, they're creating awareness of the fishing possibilities. They're perfectly willing to do that. But they have to give up time to sponsors for the infomercial.
Right.
And it doesn't leave a lot of time for them to discuss these issues. There are people who do it. Notably, I don't know if you watch Benny Blanco's show.
I do.
Benny is at the point of the spear.
Yes.
I mean, he's tireless and he's a bulldog. If all of these shows would realize that the future of their shows depends on these resources, and come to that realization as Benny has, it would help the problem, because the bottom line is that if people are not aware, nothing is going to happen. If they walk out in December and it's 72 degrees and they get their paper and they come back and they drink their coffee and read the paper, and they don't care about alligators, they don't care about pythons, they don't care about water quality, they don't care about sugarcane.
They're just doing their thing.
They're unaware that these things are boiling beneath the surface. So I would implore all these people who have
an audience,
a forum, and an audience, to devote more time to these problems, make people interested, make them aware, expose them to the natural world, for God's sakes, so that they can get in the fight with us and roll up their sleeves and get dirty. Otherwise, Florida will be paved in 40 years.
It's not slowing down.
It's not. I mean, we have a great governor, but he's anxious to inundate the state with people. Very proud of the fact that so many people are moving here every day or whatever the deal is, and there are so many new housing starts and so many new stores opening and businesses and income, and we're fiscally sound. And I'd rather the state were in debt
Yeah.
and was preserving the resources of the state, the natural resources of Florida, the things that make Florida, Florida.
It's funny you say
that stuff right there.
Yeah, I just, this morning, I don't know if it was on Instagram or something, somehow I ended up getting a notification about Florida's parks and state parks, and how there's now a push to build golf courses and all these other things on the state parks. And luckily it's gotten quite a bit of backlash, even from the more conservative politicians in Florida, to not mess with the state parks.
I haven't heard about that.
It's pretty wild. It's a push, I guess, to...
Who is pushing for that?
The Department of Natural Resources, I think, and the governor.
You're kidding.
Nope. To build golf courses on the state parks and things like pickleball courts and disc golf. Yeah, but from what I read this morning, there's been a huge backlash that leave the parks alone. There's enough golf courses in Florida; they don't need more. I'm the perfect example, kind of what you're talking about, because I've never caught a tarpon, but I have watched Silver Kings many times, and I've watched The Sea Hunter, and I've watched these shows, and I certainly aspire to someday come down to Florida and go tarpon fishing and catch a tarpon. Never caught a tarpon. But to watch those shows and to see what's there, but then also to be educated by Captains for Clean Water, from following them on Instagram and following their fight. I don't live in Florida, but I am certainly aware of the water problems here, and any way I could advocate to protect the waters and change the flow of water back south through the Everglades. I mean, I think I'm the perfect example of what you're talking about, because I have been exposed to the resource through those shows, and I've been exposed to the problem through social media, and I'm aware of it. So I think that as far as what you're talking about, the awareness is working, at least with somebody like me.
Well, it's a function of commitment. This comes to mind. Jose, who had one of the great fishing shows of all times, because of his unique ability to sit down and peer into the lens of a camera and talk to that lens as though he were talking to you or myself. And he would look into the lens and he would go, come here, I want to show you this hook, and I want to show you how to sharpen this hook so that you don't miss fish. I mean, he could do that. If Jose were here doing that today, I know that Jose would sit there and peer into the camera and invite people to come sit next to him and take the time to explain to them what the water problems are and other problems in the state of Florida that threaten the things that are so near and dear to our hearts. The people who have these forums today should be doing that. I think some part of every one of their shows should be dedicated to awareness, making their viewership aware of what the problems are that face us now and will face us in the future. As a state that has a background of significant natural history, it's where they're falling short today, and I think people would be interested in that. A call to action is simply something that's necessary. It always has been, always will be. But it's lost on programming today. I think we need to realize that and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, they have the megaphone. They should use it.
Yes.
They should use it.
Exactly.
I mean, they've got the people are watching it because of the resource that's here, so it's just in their own interest to help protect it. I want to switch gears a little bit. We, as we've talked, this whole thing started with I volunteer with Project Healing Waters, who works with disabled veterans on teaching them about fly fishing and how to fly fish and tie flies and things of that nature. And listening to some of their stories and being a veteran myself, and just how much nature has helped so many of those people, and just getting out into a river has literally saved their lives, and that's what they'll tell you. And that's kind of what got me thinking, it'd be great to have a podcast that focused on that and got some of their stories out there, but just hoping that other people might see it and be inspired to, if they're struggling, be inspired to take that step of getting out into nature to start their healing process. As someone who has literally spent their entire life outdoors, what has it meant to you, and what does it mean to you, nature and spending time outdoors? And, how has it helped you get through hard times in your own life? Is there some examples, or just in general, that you can speak to?
I think it all goes back to things that you said in the opening of this podcast. The healing properties of nature and the ability of nature to provide a sanctuary where you can think about things without having to put your foot on a brake pedal or an accelerator or stop for a red light or pay a cashier. Those are things that, sitting in a place like this, no matter where it is, it could be in a canoe. You could lay down in the bottom of a canoe and just drift for 3 hours. It just gives you a time that I think we need to reset, or to think about problems that we have and arrive at a solution or a plan without the without the pressures of daily activities, without responsibilities. You do need to step away. You need to push away from the dock. You need to take your shoes off. You need to get dirty. You need to perspire. These are all things that modern life doesn't give you time to do.
I don't think, and I think part of it, and I'm not a scientist, but I think that we're not far removed from our hunter-gatherer ancestors. I don't think we're meant to be so far removed and so involved in technology as we are today. And I think it's, we belong outside to a degree.
Think about this. My grandfather knew how to find water, drinking water. He didn't worry that 2 hours from now he might get thirsty. He could always find water. He could always make a fire.
Yep.
He could always make a fire. He could always find water. He understood how to make soap. He that's how little we are removed from generations that were perfectly at home. In other words, my neighbor over there, if I took him 80 yards back into these woods and spun him around 3 times and left him there, he would wander around out there and perish.
There'd be a search party.
He would perish, and all around him would be everything that he needed to have a wonderful life. There's nothing that could not be provided 80 yards back into this woods for a sustainable life. But if he couldn't get to a 7-Eleven before nightfall, he would perish. He would not know how to deal with the insects. He would never find water. He would not know how to make shelter. He would not know how to start a fire. All these things on his very own planet, and he would perish in 3 days back there.
Yeah, I think there's everything is so instant now. Instant gratification. You order something from Amazon, it's there in a day.
I like that.
I like that too, actually. But, the answers are all at their fingertips.
Yes.
And I think that you don't realize until you step away how great it feels to be away from your phone, to disconnect. I think that people don't realize it until they unplug how amazing it feels to be away from. Some people don't like it, but I think for the majority of people, it's healing just to get away from all that stuff. And I don't know, I'm hoping, and I don't have any empirical data to back this up, but I feel like, and I've got 2 younger children. I've got a 20-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. And, just even them, I feel like they're just dying for a little bit more of an analog world. I'm hoping that there'll be some sort of a push to get a little bit more analog and less digital, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's frightening to me to think about what might happen. It's frightening. But then again, I'm an old guy. I'm not going to be here to see a whole lot more of it. And I feel pretty lucky that I've been able to see what I've seen and do what I've done and wander around in the free marsh and see amazing things that I've seen in Florida and around the world where I've been fortunate enough to travel. Just luck has always been on my side.
That's a good thing.
Lucky guy. I wish I could say that I skillfully planned all this, but not the case.
I think that also the other thing that you mentioned earlier when we were talking about, the difference between hunting with a traditional recurve bow and a compound bow, and I think it's the same with fly fishing or anything. The harder it is, I think the more effort and the work that you have to put into it when you achieve a goal, it's that much more rewarding. And I think that's what attracts people to fly fishing and, a recurve bow, or getting more in touch with, the more primal side of it. And the harder you have to work, the more rewarding it is once you accomplish that goal. And I think that's lost today a lot too.
For sure. I mean, almost completely lost. Fly fishing keeps those things alive a little better than most things. Traditional archery has, during my lifetime, always been a struggle because the modern stuff was introduced early on in my archery life. So I've seen a lot of changes there. This whole notion that crossbows and compound bows are archery is foreign to me. They're wonderful devices. I have a lot of respect for the people who have really become competent in their use. They're tremendously effective. They're not archery. They're not. They're wonderful hunting tools, and they should be used, and they're welcome to be used. I think there should be an archery season. But that's my own prejudice. It will probably not happen ever again. But I know that many of those people ultimately come around to archery later in their careers. I know a lot of them that have. And I've owned a compound bow. They're amazing. Oops, sorry.
That's all right.
We can even cut here and then do the closing.
I'm going to finish it up here in the next few minutes. Okay.
Yeah, that would be good, because then we could probably do it before he gets.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
So, what's next for Flip Pallot? What's the next chapter? I mean, now that you're a rum magnate, you're
the rum thing has been such a fabulous journey and such a wonderful story. And I've gotten to meet some amazing people and learn a lot, too. Because when we went into it, it was almost a joke. It was just a few buddies sitting around a campfire drinking rum. And somebody said, hey, let's go in the rum business, sell the company for billions of dollars, and we'll take all our friends to the Seychelles on our new jet. And so it's been an amazing journey to bring a really, really quality product to market. And hopefully, it'll be a wonderful thing someday. Maybe not for me, but maybe for my daughter and my granddaughter. but for me, it's just a wonderful work in progress with wonderful people.
And it sounds like it's growing. I mean, I understand.
It's doing well.
Yeah,
it's doing really well.
It's regional now, but you're going nationwide.
We've gone nationwide.
Okay.
It's nationwide now.
And the name of the company slips my mind right now.
Frigate Reserve.
Frigate Reserve. That's right.
So it's lifted off.
Anything else on the horizon? Any other projects or things you want to accomplish?
Well, I'm looking forward to this hunting season, which starts in about 2.5 weeks. Our archery season starts. And once that starts, I'll be in the woods until the middle of January. And every November, Rob Fordyce and I go to Texas for a couple of weeks. And I look forward to that every year. And I've got some wonderful invitations to go to some other terrific whitetail properties this year in other parts of the country, and I'm looking forward to that. So the near horizon is all about hunting. And then after February, then I'm back on the water again.
Sounds like a good outlook for things to come. Before we finish up, is there anything you want to add as far as, again, back to the theme that we're trying to get across with the podcast, as far as, helping folks who may be struggling and the healing power of spending time in nature? Any last words you want to have about that?
Yeah, I think that with regard to that, I think that I will pledge my endeavors in the future to preserving those things so that people who need them can have access to them. I think my role is more a role of preservation at this point. And I'll fight till my heart is black and blue to make that happen. It feels a lot like tilting at windmills, but I'll do it all the same. I think we have to realize that our role is to be as vocal, as outspoken, as willing to make noise as the people who are willing to take it away from us are willing to do. So that'll be my role.
Well, thank you again, Flip. I really appreciate you coming on today. It's great to be at your beautiful home, and thanks again.
Thanks for your efforts.
Thanks.